All right, let's look at this example with aspirin and heart attack risk. So researchers want to investigate whether taking aspirin regularly reduces the risk of heart attack. 400 men between the ages of 50 and 84 are recruited as participants. The men are divided randomly into two groups. One group will take aspirin and the other group will take a placebo. Each man takes one pill each day for 3 years, but he does not know whether he is taking aspirin or the placebo. At the end of the study, researchers count the number of men in each group who have had heart attacks. So identify the following values for this study. So what was our population in this study? So our population is going to be men ages 50 to 84. Okay, so that's actually going to be all men aged 50 to 84. What was our sample? Well, our sample, okay, was men aged 50 to 84. But remember, a sample is a subset of the population. Okay, what we mean by a subset is a smaller number. Okay, so you can imagine the population of men in the United States, age 50 to 84, would be in the millions. Can't conduct an experiment on millions of people. It's way too many. Instead, our sample is 400. Okay, that's our sample. What are the experimental units? So remember, an experimental unit is a dispassionate, impersonal way of referring to the subject of the study, in which case the experimental units were individual men in the study. So you don't refer to them as men, as humans, as people. You just refer to them as experimental units. Okay. What was the explanatory variable? Well, the explanatory variable was our oral medication, which was the aspirin. Okay. And we're going to be controlling the amount of aspirin or whether aspirin is taken or not taken. Okay. Let me see here. I want to investigate whether taking it regularly. Men are divided randomly into two groups. One group will take aspirin and the other will take a placebo. So in this problem, we just know that they're taking aspirin, but they could have, had some of them taking like a low dose of aspirin, and low, what does that mean? Okay, I'm just guessing. Let's just say that that's 10 milligrams. Okay, I'm not in the health profession, so this could be really low and really bad. Um, but another one would be medium, maybe a medium dose of aspirin. Okay, and that might be 100 milligrams. And then they could have given some people a high dose. Okay, and maybe a high dose would be 500 milligrams, something like that. So you control the input, you control the explanatory variable, because those are things within your control. That's what you can change. And we look to see if either 0 milligrams, okay, this would be the placebo group, if the placebo group has a response different to different medication levels, and to see whether aspirin even made a difference. So what is the response variable? Well, whether a subject, or whether not a subject, but maybe an experimental unit had a heart attack. Okay. The treatment was either aspirin or a placebo. And again, the treatment could have been, 10 milligrams versus 100 milligrams and 500 milligrams Placebo is 0 milligrams of aspirin. Okay. And that's it for this one. So for this example, we just were given the description of an experimental study, and just kind of identify what was the population in this study? What was the sample in this study? What is an experimental unit? Okay. So kind of trying to draw, definitions of these terms to, a more realistic example. All right. Let me know if you have any questions.